Well, hey, Living Environment fans, it's your instructor, Mr. Kovac, and as you may have noticed, I am not here. I'm here in the Bellringer, but I'm not here in the office today. An appointment I need to take care of, so luckily I left you in good hands of a substitute teacher. And the beauty of it is that you already know the routine, right? So I don't have to even remind you to do this Bellringer. Right? And then there's an ed puzzle today about the characteristics of life. It's Amoeba Sisters, my favorite YouTubers. And then there's a notes assignment. Plus some of you are still working on Safety Lab, your Safety Lab posters. Some of you are finishing up book talk. There's lots going on today. Let's do the bell ring.
All right.
Hey now.
Mr. Kovac's class. It's Mr. Kovac's class. You might learn a ton. It's Mr. Kovac's class.
He's interested too.
It's Mr. Kovac's class.
And he's super cool.
It's Mr. Kovac's class.
It's alive, alive, alive. Well, that was kind of random, but the question still remains. Things are alive and some things are not alive. And some things were alive and are no longer alive, and some things are not alive and never were alive, and some things are very much alive. Like, how can you tell? Some things it's easy to tell if they're alive, like you and me running around, moving and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's got to be alive. But then you look at like an oak tree, which is definitely alive, but it doesn't do much at all. In fact, part of the time it seems like it's not alive. Like in the fall, it drops all its leaves and it's like it's dead. But then it's not dead because it comes back to life in the spring. It's so confusing. I don't know. Let's look at what it means to be alive. Now, a lot of living things are made out of multi-cells or multicellular, like a mouse, let's say. And one of the things that I know that they're alive is they grow. Right? Not only do they grow, they change their shape and what they do. They develop, right? Like every mouse starts as one cell and then eventually becomes a cute little baby mouse. Right? So all living things are made of cells. All living things can grow and develop. Another thing that's true about life, you think about it, like to stay alive, you have to eat. That's true of most things, although not everything eats. Like plants don't eat, they make their own food through what's called photosynthesis. And funguses really don't eat, but they kind of do. They basically absorb nutrients through their bodies, but they have to be born in the food stuff that they need for their lives. But regardless, all living things, you need to obtain energy, and then you've got to use that energy to do something. Another characteristic of life that maybe you never thought about is life resists chaos. Living things like to keep their internal conditions nice and steady as much as possible. Here, I'll give you an example, right? You like to keep your body temperature at 98.6 degrees, right? You do that no matter what. It could be freezing cold outside, you still maintain that body temperature, steady state, 98.6 degrees. It's a blistering hot day, you still maintain. Now, if you're having a hard time maintaining that body temperature, like on a hot day, maybe you do something to cool off, like sweat, to bring your body temperature back down to where it's supposed to be. You try to maintain what we call homeostasis. Homeostasis, that'll be a word that we'll learn to love. Right? So that's another characteristic of life. Probably the most important characteristic of life is made up of cells. We talked about cells, kind of. They're bubbles with chemicals inside. So a typical cell is a bubble made out of lipid. So all living things have an outer boundary made out of lipid. And then inside is a mixture of water and other chemicals, which include proteins, and then some other chemicals too, like nucleic acids and sugars and various minerals and other things floating around. Okay? But what makes them living is that they can maintain this condition. And of course, the last characteristic of living things is they can copy themselves. Right? You can either copy all or part of yourself. Reproduction is a characteristic of living things. In fact, that's how we knew the first living things were living. They could copy themselves. So let's see, you're alive. That means use energy, right? You and I, we eat. We're what we call heterotrophs. We eat. You maintain stable internal conditions. Like, you are always working to keep the right amount of oxygen in your blood and carbon dioxide in your blood, and you're trying to keep the right amount of food nutrients in your blood, and you're trying to keep the right temperature of your blood. And blood's really important. You know, you're always trying to do that. Your eyes adjust to the amount of light coming in by changing the size of your pupil, those kinds of things. All right? Grow and develop, right? You're not just a big overgrown baby. You've changed over time, and you've added more cells. And then, of course, you're made of cells. You're made of trillions of cells, and those cells will copy themselves. In fact, I know they've copied themselves because that's how you even got bigger, by adding more cells to the cells that you already had, right? Life, you are alive. And we'll talk more in class.